Hello and welcome to episode 9 of Talking Ruggers, the show where we talk ruggers with everyone involved in our beloved game who aren't only current professional players. From content creators and online coaches to fashion designers and even other podcasters, everyone who is bringing our beloved game forward into the 21st century. The podcast works through 3 sections, taking a deep dive into the details of our guests' past, their rugby story and how it led to where they are today, their present situation, providing professional advice on how to get into and thrive within the working rugby world. And then we finish off by looking forward into rugby's future and our guests' take on how we can save the game through the perspective of their industry. And this week, we will be talking ruggers with a bloke who has arguably the best professional CV in world rugby that you've never heard of. At the peak of his professional career, this guy was the global product manager for both Gymshark and Nike Rugby, back when they used to do some incredibly innovative things in the game. Since then, he's gone at it alone and started his own rugby lifestyle clothing brand to fill a gap in the off-field game garment market. We discussed how his upbringing around sport in the northeast of England influenced his career. He gave some great advice on how you might be able to find work in a similar industry yourself, and we of course put the rugby world to rights, interestingly, through everything off the field. He's an incredibly intelligent and pragmatic man, but ultimately, as most Northerners are, an unbelievably good bloke. So this week we are talking ruggers with who you may know as Old Novo, but I know as the man behind the brand, Matt Dehaty. Hello to the Talking Ruggers Republic. We've got to try and think of a name to call you guys. Thank you so much for all your support you've been giving on all the episodes. Apologies for the break we took last week. Done 80 episodes, 2 months straight. Things got a bit busy for me. I went off to Dubai, had a good weekend. I was moving back from Australia to the UK, which is where I now reside. So apologies for the delay in this episode, but it's a good one. I hope you enjoy. If you do, please, it does us the world of good to go down below, drop a like on the episode, rate it 5 stars if that's the podcast platform you're on. Potentially leave a comment too. What's your favorite takeaway from it? Who do you want to hear from next? There's plenty of guests lined up, but I want to get your input as much as possible, and your support means the world. Honestly, I appreciate it so much. I love doing this, but it does have that little bit of a cherry on top when you do go down and support the channel along the way. Maybe even share it with a friend. Goodness, what else could I ask from you guys other than just enjoying the show? Subscribe if you are new, and otherwise, let's get straight into the episode. All right, Matt, talk to me. For people who may not know, in your own words, describe to me, what is Old Novo?
Well, Old Novo is the art of balancing the old and the new. I used to play rugby and feel like I sort of carry the values and the sports still in my bones and in my blood, but I don't play anymore. And it frustrates me that there isn't a rugby brand out there that's built for former rugby players. And that's what I really want to try and do is Old Novo is about creating a lifestyle brand for rugby players. Target market is really people that used to play the game. People like myself. It's really easy for me to make a brand where I'm making product for people like me. I've got the audience right in front of me.
I used to say that all the time with my content that I was making. It was so easy because I am my target audience. Whatever I think would be interesting to talk about in rugby, I just start talking about. And it sounds like you got doesn't sound like it. I know for sure you've got the marketing down pat, because that is what your whole career was oriented around back in day, which we'll get into in deeper detail. But you can see from the name itself, Old Novo. Talk me through how that came to pass, because it's quite literally the old and the new.
Yeah, the old and the new. So this is like going back to school here, but in Latin, the name for somebody that's from Newcastle is an old Novocastrian, and that Novocastrian is just Novo, new, and Castrian castle. And I just like the play of old and Novo for new together. I like that juxtaposition of the two. And I thought that might be a really good brand name and it links back to the fact that the school I went to, they call old boys from RGS Newcastle old Novocastrians, people from Newcastle. I've left Newcastle when I was younger and came back, so it just made sense for me. I've had some real trouble trying to trademark the name, which is another story for another day, and that's not resolved yet. But once it is, I'll be really happy and be able to keep that name. I had some good news last week where I finally got the trademark registration through, but it's still a sort of a bit up in the air. But yeah, long story, but old and new, and it links back to my school. It links back to rugby in the Northeast, and people from Newcastle will recognize the name. I had a few local clubs say, "Are you sponsoring the club Old Novo?" So I was like, no, different thing, but.
Yeah, right. No, that makes a whole lot of sense when you say it like that. I didn't know that was quite the story behind it. I could imagine from what I've seen on you talking about social media and stuff like that, where you're discussing about like the old and the new and making this brand around people who might not still be playing the game anymore but love it. But that's proper heritage to it. That's yeah, a real story behind it.
Well, I played around with the idea of trying to sell rugby product to everybody. And what I'm realizing now is like the brands that are working, that you find a really niche that's uniquely them. And people seem to like founder-led brands. And if I'm the founder, it doesn't make a lot of sense me trying to sell to 18-year-old guys that are just coming through school and playing still. It makes a lot more sense to me to talk to people like me that used to play the game. So yeah, I also think the sportswear industry isn't offering up anything really cool in rugby, and I have to watch what I say because there's some really reputable brands doing a really good job of on-field uniform. But I think when you go off the field, nobody's really doing a good job. And I'm sorry if anybody from Canterbury is listening to this, but I remember seeing an image of a typical sort of meme of denim jeans, brown shoes, and a polo shirt, and being that's the off-field uniform of rugby.
Yeah.
I just know that there's so many rugby players out there that just turn away from that and want to wear cooler contemporary sportswear. And I'm not the only one. I see people doing the same thing across other brands as well. It needs to happen, but no big brand's doing it yet.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder because, like yourself, there are other people now who are starting to lean into this off-field culture, and it makes you wonder why the big brands aren't catching on to it, because there is such a massive space for it, especially with the way that rugby's moving off the field. Like I keep on talking to so many people on the podcast about how World Rugby is so focused on changing the rules of the game to make it more interesting or more exciting or simpler to understand. But in reality, you can't really do that because it's going to take rugby away from what it really is at its core. But what you can focus on, that other sports do really well, is everything after the final whistle or between the two whistles. Like you look at American football, the ball in play time is like non-existent. It's a matter of seconds, but they get everything around it so right. You look at baseball, for example, or like in basketball where they had like the Harlem Globetrotters, and in baseball they had this like banana team. I don't know what it's called, but they just make the atmosphere. Yeah, have you seen it?
Like the guy that wears all yellow, he's got like a bowler hat,
exactly.
a yellow bowler hat. Yeah, I forget his name. Yeah.
But like they're again like founder-led people who are creating something beyond just being on the field. And that's where, like, going back to what you said about being founder-led, it's so interesting to see the evolution of like the smaller business in the rugby space and broadly speaking in the business space, where a lot of people who put their face to the brand are the ones who can really connect with people. When you tell the story yourself, which is what you're doing, it really resonates with people. And that's what essentially connects them to make a purchase. But that's the end of your story. This is where we are right at the end. I want to go back to the start of your story. Tell me about the old days at Old Novo up in Newcastle where you're playing on an icy cold pitch. Where did rugby start for you?
So I say sent. I went from the local primary school to a private school, which is RGS Newcastle.
Oh, right.
That was under duress. My parents tell me that when I was coming home from school, I was crying because I was being forced to play rugby as a 7-year-old kid. And so I started playing rugby when I was 7, but I wanted to play football. People in Newcastle, kids want to play football. And I must have been a bit of a big lump and managed to play reasonably well. And I think it was the first time I really felt any confidence from what I was doing in sport. And turned out I was better than I'd realized at rugby, and started to fall in love with it. And then I think from probably the age of 10, which sounds really young, to 18, like I can't really remember thinking about doing anything else other than playing rugby. I went from somebody who didn't like the idea of playing, being forced to playing in what was quite a successful team. our school team went to the semi-final of the Daily Mail Cup. We had an unbeaten season one year. I played North under 16s and North under 18s, and I took it really, really seriously. Rugby was like the vocation for me. I was going to a school that was saying you need to be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, and in my head, I'm going to be a rugby player. So I started. I played club rugby too, Gosforth Rugby Club, which back in the 70s was one of the best clubs in the country. Played there before they became the Newcastle Falcons. In, I think it was 97, 98, they became the Newcastle Falcons, and I was at the Gosforth club then. And then my eyes turned into, I want to play for the Newcastle Falcons. It turned into, that's the ambition. So that ended up, I stayed in the Northeast, went to university, and well, it's another longer story, but I went to Newcastle for 1 year and then moved to Northumbria. So they're big rivals, which was a bit controversial to go from one to the other. But I'm not bore you with the details of my career choice, but I changed to degree, and I never looked anywhere else other than Newcastle because I wanted to play for the Newcastle Falcons. I ended up playing a few games for the second team, and play for Blaydon Rugby Club in the Northeast. So very much Northeast focused rugby, which is different. Like, I feel like rugby can be very London centric, or definitely like, I'd say Southern centric. There isn't enough happening in the Northeast. So there's another reason why I started Old Novo. I want to try and do more for Northeast rugby.
Yeah, well, they talk about that all the time in the Premiership, where some teams have to take a long old trip up the whatever motorway it is, all the way up to Newcastle, and it's like, oh my goodness, that is a long way away. And you look at the spread of teams, and there's like 4 teams in London or around the surrounding London area. Like, you're right, it is. I don't want to say dying, because I've never been up there to really see it myself, but it's definitely smaller. And the next closest club being Manchester doesn't really help. Like, it's still pretty far away. But that sounds like a tough rugby upbringing, a story that's not too uncommon. I'm sure there's plenty of other lads like myself who had the dream of playing professional rugby, but it just sounds a little bit more miserable doing it up there where it's freezing cold all the time. You must have hated it growing up when you're a young lad.
The Falcons ground, at the time is pretty open. Now that the Red Bulls, hopefully they'll cover that in a little bit to protect it a little bit from the wind, but it's notoriously, like, winter is a really bad place to go. Under the floodlights, dark, windy, rainy. The North stand doesn't have a cover on it. The fans call it the hardcore stand, because if you go, you pay for a standing ticket, you get no seat and you get no shelter, but it's where the hardcore fans go.
Blimey, that sounds horrendous. And what position were you playing when you were growing up and all the way through?
I basically played everywhere other than scrum half. I think I was a back row, really, 6 and 8, until I was about 18, 19. And then the then academy director, his name was Paul McKinnon, he's a Kiwi, he persuaded me to move to centre. So I switched from 6 and 7 to centre. And at that point, I think that made a lot of sense, because I was a back rower that liked to run with the ball, pass the ball, carry. I liked contact, but I wasn't a guy that was chasing rucks and tackles. I liked to be out in the backfield quite a lot, and it was turned into, you need to be out in the centres using your distribution and using your ball carrying more. But in hindsight, the game's changed so much now. I probably could have, like, if I was playing today, I probably would have stayed 6 or 8. Like, I look at the change of shape of players.
That is so true. I remember, like, you hear about like Tom Youngs, who went from centre to hooker. Like, I think positions changed a little bit more back in the day, where there's a bit more cross referencing and like a little bit less hyper specialization. Whereas now every player has to have good catch pass skill. Like, it doesn't differentiate you to move into the backs if you do. If anything, if you don't, then you're not going to get picked at all. So that's real interesting.
I was also not particularly fast, so it made being a centre difficult. So I used to I was always worried about making tackles. So like, someone's going to just rinse me for speed at some point.
Burn you on the outside.
I remember having a realization. There was 2 games. It was one of the Quinnell brothers. I think he's the youngest Quinnell brother. He played for Worcester. I remember him running at me as a back row. We were down in Worcester for the away game. And he ran at me and sat me down on my arse, and I was thoroughly embarrassed, because I thought that was what I was good at, as being like a big centre. I was like, well, I'm not fast and I'm not that big, and I'm going to get sat down anyway. This is not a good start. And there was one game I played against Ollie Phillips for Durham University. I was at Northumbria University, and I remember him just standing up and running around me like I was not there, and thought, I'm not going to be a pro rugby player. It was that realization, it dawned on me that this is not happening.
Life was passing you by in slow motion as you see the guy just drift past you, and your life flashes before your eyes, all the dreams. Go with it.
Just melted away.
Yeah, well, that's the sad side of things, I suppose, but that's some pretty cool things. But tell me, like, what's your fondest memory of either like playing rugby young lad or at university? Do you have anything that stands out?
There's achievements that I tell people about, but it's weird. I don't really remember those games. Like in my first year at Northumbria, we went to Twickenham and we played in what was called the Booster final. It was Bucks. Now I guess we played.
All right.
We played there. That was that was the moment where I was like, it's amazing. I got to play at Twickenham, and those are the achievements. But I don't remember the game at all. I remember one pass that I gave that went to floor instead of the hands. Like that sticks with me.
Classic.
The rest of the game I don't really
Burned
remember.
in the memory.
Yeah, it's weird. I think the memories around rugby are the most fond memories. Like it's this, and this is what the brand's built on, like that, like the brotherhood and bus trips and singing rugby songs and first pint after a game and those sort of things. That's the stuff that I actually really remember and really miss. I was thinking the other day about polishing boots the night before a game. I don't know, but back then I was wearing leather boots like World Cups and Copa Mundials, but
yeah,
you'd be in your in the kitchen and like cleaning up the boot and getting ready and thinking about the game the next day. And it's all those little rituals around the sport that I really miss more than the actual game itself. It's a tough place to play rugby, and training on a Tuesday and Thursday night and rucking practice in the rain is really not that much fun. It's something you have to do to earn the right to play, but the rest around the game is just like, I miss it so much.
And again, a not too uncommon answer. Most of the lads that I've spoken to just talk about that off-field sort of thing. It's genuinely the case with rugby. I think it's the game that surrounds it that everyone loves, arguably at most part, more than the game that's going on the field. Like I went back to training. I just got back to the UK. Landed on Monday. Tuesday night, I was like, screw it, I'm going to get straight back into rugby. I haven't chucked a ball around in like 9 months. I was playing Aussie rules, which is a little bit different, but similar enough. But I was like, okay, I'll go to training. And it was great. Walking back in the rooms, and in the corner, there's some lads having a sap. In the other side, there's some lads like having a good laugh, like the different like groups of people you can find there. But oftentimes it's those little conversations, arguably the ones where you're being super negative and you talk about how much you hate rugby and how much you don't want to play anymore, but you still rock up out there and mix it amongst the lads. It's so funny how every like locker room has the same lads who are like, why am I even here? I don't want to do this. And then they go up there and have a smile on their face and it was a good time.
Yeah, you feel good afterwards. And it's like a thing, like the 20 minutes while you're sort of gathering before training actually starts and you're just booting the all around between each other. And it's like that's just, I would do that now. I know that you did like a sort of skill session. We talk about that. I miss that like moment where you're just like hanging out for this, not for the purpose of trying to get better. You're just like kicking a ball around. It's just so much fun.
Well, that was my worst nightmare as a coach, was when like lads wouldn't be doing like skill specific stuff and improving before the session. But then you realise that some lads just like having a little natter, warming into the session, like more emotionally, I suppose, than technically. So then when they rock up, they're the lads who are just flying around and putting themselves in some pretty dark places.
Yeah. Just going back to what you said about different sport, like what rugby could be doing better. If you think about running right now, and no doubt there's a running club, a run club near you, or linked to a coffee shop or some sort of store, what's happening right now. There is, when you was mentioning what rugby could do, like World Rugby or Prem Rugby, it tends to be focused around how do we get more people to games to sell more tickets to get more TV revenue. But there isn't a moment like that in running. It's a sport that lots of people take part in, but they've cultivated an environment, a community in very small sections that people really want to be part of. And there are businesses generating large revenue off the back of that. And I think that's where it's the mentality of it's around the game and the club and getting people into stadiums. I think rugby can offer way more than that, than just on-field and TV rights. And I think that's what they are missing a trick with. That if you could bottle the feeling of that you and I remember of being around your mates and hanging out together and having a laugh, and that club mentality, that's before running clubs, people went to sports clubs and got the same thing. Running clubs have sort of stolen that that feeling.
And I know that feeling all too well, the same as everyone listening to this, most likely. And that's what I tried to recreate with. I did 4 weeks of a Sunday skills club
Yeah.
at university where I just essentially got all the lads together and anyone else who wanted to come along on a Sunday, which is probably the worst day to do it because everyone was hanging out their arse from Saturday night the day before. But it was a
Yeah.
good way to get outside, get amongst it with the lads, and build that feeling amongst things, which is something that I think is missing a little bit. And when you mentioned the comparison between rugby and running, you realise that running. Of course, there's like the Diamond League athletics and stuff like that, and you see marathons, but
Yeah.
no one, unless you're a die-hard fan, is really watching that. You don't get the same sort of amateur spectator viewership that you do at rugby, but there's definitely a way of really leaning into that off-field stuff that we're talking about, which is essentially what this is all about.
This is a controversial statement, but like the professionalism that came in the end of the 90s sort of has, like, imagine professionalism didn't happen. Amateur club rugby had that feeling nailed down, where
Mm.
local people would help keep clubs alive. There was no money in it. It was just purely just through goodwill and volunteering. And there was a real spirit around the game. And that's sort of gone away a lot since professionalism. Clubs have soaked up all the resources, and volunteers have ended up helping out at games with big crowds.
I find it fascinating, the differences between sports. It's something that I've learnt a lot about since the conversations I've had with people, but in particular football. For example, when I was
Right.
speaking to Kurt's Code the other week, and we were talking about getting rugby into lesser known countries. Like, you don't realize how far and wide rugby actually reaches for how
Yeah.
complicated the game is. It's not quite like football where you put two jumpers on the floor, all of a sudden you've got a goal, all you need is a ball, and you
Yeah.
can play loads of different kinds of games. Like, is incredibly complicated. But since the turn of professionalism, but before my time, by the way, I didn't even know what rugby was. I wasn't even born yet when it was still unprofessional.
Yeah.
But it's become even more and more complicated. And it's fascinating the difference between rugby and football in that sense, where, of course, in football, there's all the formations, the systems, and like intellectual coaches like Guardiola who've sort of changed the game. Whereas in rugby, it's this slowly still evolving sport where now you look back at even like 2011, doesn't even have to be back in the stone ages of rugby, right at the start, where you look back there and they look like you're thinking, why on earth are you throwing 8 men into one ruck? Like, what on earth is that about? Whereas now you see how it's all evolved all the way through, even to like 2008, perhaps, where
Yeah.
they'd still chuck all the forwards into the ruck and then give the backs a go. It was the turning point was around the 2015 World Cup, in my opinion, with the All Blacks team that was just unbelievable because of the shape that they had and how they only ever threw 2 players into each breakdown. But the point being that the game is just slowly becoming more and more and more complicated. And I think that's the major difference between that and why it's changed from the days of old. It's just slightly more nauseating.
Yeah, we've got World Rugby to thank as well. The game's become more attractive to play and faster, and less people in breakdowns because of rule changes. And those law changes are helping speed up the game and making a more attractive brand of rugby.
And I think it's crazy to other people that rugby changes its rules so often. I
Yeah.
think because you watch football, obviously, and like they introduced the TMO or the VAR in their own language. But then you look at, I was in Australia playing Aussie rules, and each season they change like 5 rules, and like quite major rules, like to start a game, well, to restart after any 6-point goal that's kicked. The
Right.
referee or the umpire would come in and like slam the ball into the ground and bounce it back up into the air to restart the game. It's like a tip off in basketball in that first tip.
Yeah.
But they now, like, which is a massive part of the game, but they now got rid of it. The ref does a ball up instead, like he'll just lob the ball in the air because it was so unreliable trying to bounce the ball on the ground, and other things like that. It's like major changes to the game, and it's actually improved ball in play time. They're actually just looking to modernize the sport, and I think that's what rugby's doing, but not necessarily focusing on potentially the best areas of doing that, which is, in my opinion, includes the off-field stuff too.
Yeah, modernizing the sport. I mean, that's so. This is hard for me to say because I worked at Nike on field uniforms, jerseys for players, and that was very much the mentality about modernizing. Like, Nike's always trying to innovate, and we would make jerseys lighter or add grippers to them to improve contact with the ball and faster faster players means faster game, means more points, etc. All of that was all wrapped up into just general innovation. But in a sense, sorry, and the highlight of that would have been like 2003. So before that, people were still wearing like baggy, loose fit jerseys. And then 2003 World Cup, England versus France in the World Cup warm-ups, they come out in these completely skin-tight jerseys and change the game. And I think since then, there's been this like steady walk where every brand sort of gone the same way into synthetic, tight-fitting jerseys with lots of graphics. And I don't think that's what rugby fans want. It makes the players faster, and it's certainly necessary now on field for durability and the speed of the game. But following the football route of replica jerseys isn't what was right for the rugby fans. Like if you go and watch a game, ask me and look at what the fans are actually wearing. They're not wearing synthetic rugby jerseys. It's just not a thing. You're more likely to see them wearing a heritage vintage version from 20 years ago, right?
I don't want to wear a skin-tight jersey to a game. Like, for one, the rig would never allow it. But for two, I actually want to be comfortable at a game and, like, look a bit trendy. Like, it doesn't look trendy to wear, like, the exact match kit. Like, you look at, like, for example, at football games, and lads will wear their hoodies and then their shirt over the top because it's a nice, loose-fitting fit and it looks pretty cool. But in rugby, you don't quite see that. But we've brushed over an important bit of detail here, Matt, and I want to backtrack a little bit because we're putting the world to rights, which is supposed to come later in the pod, but I want to talk more about your story and give a bit more weight to why your opinion potentially might be a little bit more valuable than others. So talk me through how you went from university and then forward into your career. Give us some insight into, your pedigree as a rugby marketer and sportswear and activewear person.
Yeah, there's a long version of this which would take the rest of the podcast, but because it's a 20-year career in sportswear. But I just talked a little bit about 2003, but so I was still at university then, and I remember reading Clive Woodward's book after they won the World Cup, and in that he talks about how Nike developed a skin tight jersey with Jason Robinson in mind.
I remember hearing about it.
And this was. To me, he had images of before. If you go and get the book, it's got Robinson pre and post in the two jerseys, and you can see. And it's just visually just so appealing and inspiring to somebody that took rugby seriously to think, can I be a better player by thinking about everything about the game, all the details. Nutrition is taken care of, fitness is taken care of, but the actual clothes and boots you wear can make you a better player. And then I started thinking about maybe I want to work in the sportswear industry. And I talked to Adidas and Nike and the brands that I was fans of. And I was wanting to get a grad scheme. That was the sort of route in. I emailed Nike in the UK and said, why don't you have a grad scheme? Because I couldn't find it anywhere. And this is just sheer luck. But it turned out that their head office was in Washington, which is just outside of Sunderland near Newcastle. And they said, we don't have a grad scheme, but we've got some jobs coming up. Are you interested in applying for one? And I got the job. I was vastly underprepared for that role. I hated it, but I knew that I wanted to work for a brand like Nike for the reasons I talked about. And I remember in the first week being given a presentation and an induction around, I mean, the guy's name is Neil. I always talk about this moment because it's burned in my head. And he was showing the new Premiership ball, and he was holding it in his hand and talking about how the ball was more round and you could strike it truer and it would be harder for goalkeepers to stop and it would fly faster. And I remember sitting and thinking, that's what I want to do. I want to be the guy that makes those decisions to make the products better for athletes. So every decision from then was, how do I move from Northeast England, which is like a satellite office for Nike, to world headquarters, which is based in Portland, Oregon. And over the course of the next 13 years, I went from the Northeast to London, to the London office, from London to Amsterdam, which was the European headquarters, and then from Amsterdam to Portland, Oregon. So ended up working on rugby while I was in Amsterdam. So I was the global product manager for all Nike Rugby, which included teams like at college level, Hartbury or Cal Berkeley in the US. It's one of the most historic US rugby teams, to Argentina, England, France, Toulouse, Saracens. It's actually interesting that the current Saracens design is a 10-year-old anniversary version of a jersey that I worked on when I was I was the product manager there, which was really cool to see. It makes me feel really old that I'm now part of a retro jersey history. But I ended up working on NFL, which was completely like absorbing experience to be in North America, working at the biggest sportswear company in the world. Was the biggest sport in North America by a country mile.
Yeah.
People might not realize this. I certainly didn't, but Nike sponsor every team in the NFL. Every single team wears Nike on field, and not like in
Whoa.
Premiership football, right? Yeah, so it's a complete league encompassing deal. So each year, teams would redesign their uniforms. They would consistently update and improve their uniform performance, and that was my job. I was working with the development team and design team and the players and the club office, so the club's front office, and then the league office as well, to try and innovate and design better uniforms to make players better and perform better.
I mean, that's quite the CV. Blimey, that's pretty technical and like all consuming as well, switching sports too.
Yeah, the switching to NFL was, I say that it was sort of wasted on me because I wasn't a football fan, as they call it. I was a rugby guy, but I remember, and this is quite embarrassing really, I was in the first week in the US, my boss took me to a Seattle Seahawks game. It was preseason, and they actually dressed me as part of the equipment staff. So I was wearing a polo and some like nice slacks and stood on the sideline during the game. So I was stood next to players like Marshall and Lynch, and didn't really understand who they were. Like, I don't expect many rugby players to know, but if you look him up, you'll see probably some of his meme videos. He's quite a character. And I had no idea who this guy was. It was sort of wasted on me to have that access. But by the end of the 4 years, I'd learned to appreciate that, like, in terms of team sports, it really is up there in the enormity of the size of the game and squad sizes that are in the 50 plus players. At some points in the season, there's like 90 players in the group, and the coordination of everything that goes on in football is incredible as a team effort. It's military precision, really.
Yeah, that is a conversation in itself worthy of some time. But I want to delve more into your story around these things. Like, I want to get some advice from you for the people who are listening at home right now, where first and foremost, of course, it's a different time back then. Like, they didn't even have a grad scheme, whereas I'm sure now they've got plenty of them. But what advice might you have for someone who is trying to get into the sportswear or marketing or like business world in sport to get themselves in there? Following up on that, what advice would you have for someone who's trying to accelerate, who might already be in that space, how they can move themselves up the business ranks? And finally, what do you think about the fact that you didn't know anything about American football? Did that benefit you or hold you back? Like, I'm very passionate about rugby. I work in rugby. I think it's my point of difference. But do you think there's something about working in an industry where you don't know the players' names, where you don't necessarily have the same respect for them, but that might actually mean that you're less in awe of them, you just have a nice conversation with them?
Yeah, there's two parts to that. The first, the career advice. Lots of people want to work for these big brands, so you need to figure out a way to make you stand out as an individual. If you're at the start of your career, that is more difficult to do because you have less to offer, you've got less experience, so you need to find a way in. And the advice I was given was about trying to find somebody that a connection or a contact, somebody that already works there that can help get your CV, your resume in front of somebody that can help you get a foot in the door. That's often overlooked. Applying through standard process through LinkedIn and expecting your CV to stand out is going to be really, really challenging. You need to find a way, and that process starts way in advance of the job being posted. You need to be working your network and trying to find people, or volunteering, or showing up at events where there's Nike staff there or Adidas staff there and saying, hi, I want to work for this company one day. Those are the sorts of things you need to be doing with passion, with integrity, and volunteering to get yourself and your name known. If you don't do that, you're just another piece of paper with black and white writing on it in an inbox. And I think most people miss out on that. Once you actually get to the interview itself or an application process, you have to present yourself in a way that you're so passionate about what you're doing that the person on the other side really wants to give you the job. The interviewer is like, that's the kid I'm going to take a bet on because he or she really wants this, or we can teach them the basics. That's what happened to me when I was working in London and moved to Amsterdam. I had no experience in actually making apparel. I didn't know how to make on-field uniforms, but I knew the game inside out. And I was the kid that would come to Amsterdam and play for the sevens team once a year. And I'd met the existing product line manager through through that process. And when the role came up, he thought of me. I was in front and center of his mind. And I think that's just, you need to work your network. You need to be able to find somebody that's willing to take a bet on you. And when you do get the chance, it's about passion and it's about like right energy in those moments, because sitting there with expectation that someone's going to give you it because you deserve it, or whatever reason, that just doesn't exist. There's so many people out there. You need to somehow present yourself so that you stand out in a way. And there was a second part of the question, which was about the NFL bit. Like, what was it like? And I remember the flip side of me knowing a lot about rugby was I tended to use my own personal knowledge as the answer to questions from designers and developers. So the way it works is they would say, hey, Matt, we need to make a decision on the fit of this jersey or this color direction. What do you think? And I would answer it personally. But the real skill of the job that I had was to be able to actually absorb that from absorb that from the actual players themselves, the people that are actually going to be wearing it, and to listen. So I was bypassing that critical step of actually going and asking the question from the clubs, which you'd expect to happen. And it was the first bit of feedback I got in the role. It was like, you can't answer the question personally. You need to go find out. Even though I was certain I was right and probably right, I still needed to go do the work. The NFL gave me that opportunity where I genuinely knew nothing. So I had to go talk to the equipment managers and the players and say, sometimes it was questionnaires, sometimes it was sending them products and saying, have these for a week and tell me, I'll give you a call, I'll come visit you, we'll sit down, we'll talk with the players and find out that way, which was absolutely brilliant because I got to talk to some amazing athletes in that time.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Not that you might have known who they are initially, but I'm sure by the end you certainly did. But I think that's a problem with not only just fashion and sports businesses, but businesses as a whole. From a marketing point of view, so I studied marketing at university, and I think a lot of the time people forget that marketing isn't just talking outwards, it's also inputting information as well, understanding what customers want, not just delivering whatever you think. And I think that's a problem with a lot of businesses, is they get caught in this downward spiral of internal approval, where someone will be like, this is a good idea, I think this, and then they'll also agree with them and they'll agree with them without actually considering what the consumer necessarily wants, and it can lead to some horrendous products coming out there. So from your side of things, with all your experience working in this rugby space, what brands do you think right now are getting it right? Which are the brands that you look at and you're like, okay, whether that's on field or off field, they're doing a good job?
I'm seeing some green shoots from the really big guys now. Like, you'll have seen Adidas has done some really nice off-field stuff for the
Adidas
All
original
Blacks.
stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I sort of shit on Canterbury a bit earlier. They did an amazing fleece piece with the women's Irish team, I think it was. Like,
Indeed, yeah.
starting to really play with some like brighter colours, bolder patterns, like a little bit more style. And
Canterbury are doing that well in the sense of they're working with the players. Like they're taking the knowledge of like Ellie Kildunn, for example, making her like the Michael Jordan of rugby. Ellie Kildunn is the Michael Jordan of rugby in that sense, because she is being put as the poster girl of the sport, taking her creativity, especially because she's such a unique individual, and actually going, here's some license to create something. Same with the Irish jerseys that you're talking about. They were designed, I'm pretty sure, by one of the Irish players.
Yeah, brilliant. And I love that. I think that's more of that. I also, Nike with French Rugby, Toulouse, they are doing some really cool off the field stuff as well. It's just there's just not enough of it. The coolest thing that's happening in rugby now, I think, is honestly the grassroots. Like what you and I are part of this, but the community itself is building a connected network of creators and I'm going to say innovators too, doing things that are completely different. And I think that's the coolest, hottest thing that's happening in rugby right now. I don't think it's coming from the really big brands. I mean, it's all over the world. There's a connected ecosystem of people that want the game to grow and be bigger. And what's really awesome is it seems like most people are willing to help each other out and to grow it and make it better. Like a rising tide raises all ships. And I really think brands will want to connect into this. The big brands will want to connect into this sooner rather than later, especially as we head up towards 2 big World Cups coming up as well.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And that's the whole point of everything that I do. Like, no matter whether it's Level Up Rugby, OJ Rugby, Talking Ruggers, or Nudge, the app, it's all about growing the game. The game in a different way that people haven't necessarily approached before. Like through Level Up, it's about educational content. Through OJ Rugby, it's about entertaining content. But then through Talking Ruggers, it's about having the discussions with everyone you just described. I've got a list of over 115 people who are involved in the game, but not just from a capacity of playing. So that's the whole point, is to chat with everyone involved who isn't only a current professional player, because there are some professional players like Ellie Kildun, for example, who has a podcast, or Paolo Adogwu and Umaga, who are both starting their own little like clothing brand. They're the people I'm interested in speaking
Yeah.
to. They may still be players, but they're actually doing something beyond that, beyond the game on the field, for the sake of the game as a whole.
The ones that are most specific to what I'm doing, the ones that I wrote a post about this not so long ago, but there's a couple that come to mind. Duncan from Bumper Vintage is one where he's now basically attracted an audience across the whole globe. And there's lots of people doing the similar thing, but I think he does it the best. I think he does a really, really good job of that. He's just so engaging and interesting to watch. And he also like layers in some. When I listened to him on here, he was talking about the technology and the products. And as somebody that works in product, I was like, this is great. I love that there's somebody else who's enthused about that. And then there's a brand in, he's a Kiwi rugby player, Levi Brown. He was Earl's Collection. He's used to play for, I think it was New Zealand Warriors, and he started a sportswear brand out there. And I think it's not a rugby brand per se, but it's very heavily influenced by it. He helped design the Warriors jersey, and as a player himself, is still really connected to the sport. I think one to really watch out with. It sort of feels a bit like a Represent Cole Buxton, but Antipodean, and it's a very, very cool. And like, I think that's probably the hottest brand that's sort of connected to rugby at the moment.
Fascinating. Yeah, there's plenty of names out there who are really helping to grow the game. Another name that I'm interested in hearing from you about is you worked for Gymshark as well, right?
I did, yeah.
Because that's
yeah.
interesting how they incorporate with loads of influences in the mainstream. Could you ever see Gymshark, like a rugby player, becoming a Gymshark athlete?
Short answer, no. Yeah, and I tell you why. Gymshark has grown rapidly, but it's realizing that the way to continue to grow is to focus specifically on gym and people that work out for the sake of working out. Now, there was a point in time where we considered like preparation for sport. You know, people do work out. Like the first time I started lifting was because I wanted to become a better rugby player. I wanted to, I don't know, be bigger and stronger and faster, that sort of thing. So that was my route into physical culture and training. But where Gymshark wins and does their best work is where people are training just for the sake of training, and they want to change the way they look. Like Ben, as the founder, went to the gym because he wanted to get bigger muscles and abs. It wasn't because he wanted to play sport better. It was the training for the sake of training. The sport of training was his endeavor. So that's where I think the answer is probably no. You'd be more likely to see a former rugby player, someone like Sam Warburton, who's now like doing, or Jamie Peacock, who's now like, I do high rocks and I used to play, but I'm really fit and that's my endeavor. It's more likely that you get a former player than a current player. I might be proven wrong because I'm not connected anymore. It's probably been about 4 or 5 months since I've been anywhere near the office, but I think short answer is no. I don't see that happening anytime soon. It'd be more likely that you'll see out of this community another brand come up and start to sign athletes themselves.
Oh, interesting. And I suppose it goes back to what you were saying a bit earlier in the podcast, where you're talking about like not selling to everyone. I think that's a bit of a problem with like, well, from a business point of view, it's like a friend to all is a friend to none. Like you try to sell to everyone, you'll sell to no one. You have to specify a niche, and that niche doesn't have to just mean small. I mean, rugby, the sport itself is niche, but it's still got millions of people involved in it. But you have to narrow down. And I think that's what I've heard from listening to marketing podcasts and things about Gymshark, where they've just sort of spread themselves a bit thin in all the way that they are working with so many different people and so many different athletes, compared to just dialing in what their core really is. What was your role with them?
My last role was the buying director. So it was over all product at Gymshark. So, product creation, really. But I'd been a rugby player since I was 7 years old, but I'd been going to the gym since I was 16 too. So I was, I'd learned a lot about, and that's, it's over 20 years of just working out, just to either to be a better rugby player or to get ready for a beach holiday or to a New Year's resolution. Like I'd trained for a long time. The move from Nike to Gymshark was predominantly around, I want to go work in that world because I could see this wave of fitness culture coming through. It's being talked about a lot right now because of running and fitness and wellness. I mean, I I could see CrossFit as an example. I don't know if you followed that wave, but it came through and grew really big to like being a global phenomenon, and then died away and has sort of been replaced by High
Yeah.
Rocks. But
Yeah.
the world is waking up to the idea that physical exercises isn't just something that's good for you and you should be doing. It's a necessity. It's an essential part of life. A nice way to look at it is you take a shower every day and you brush your teeth every day. It's daily hygiene. At some point in time, people will see physical activity as being daily hygiene too. So focusing on that particular area is not niche. Every single body on the planet should be working out and training at some point. So what exactly that looks like might differ. You might prefer to go for a run than lift weights, but it's something that the world's waking up to. And that's where my head was. I wanted to go and be part of that and grow that. But I spent 6 amazing years there. Absolutely loved it and learned so much. The reason I've ended up working for myself and by myself is the shift from Nike to Gymshark was a huge change. It was one of the biggest companies in the world, enormous, like 70,000 people work there. At the time, it was something like 35, 40 billion in revenue. Absolutely huge. Gymshark was a huge company growing really fast. The exposure and I think it was something about 300 people working there at the time and was over 170 million, which is a big company by anyone's standards and a huge success. But I was able to be involved in so much more. And I found that fascinating. So I've gone to the extreme end of that now. I'm now doing everything myself, which is just like daily, you know what it's like. It's daily learning. I'm having to try different things. I went on a Photoshop course to learn how to edit photos so that I can make sure things look good on the website. I've learned about color grading. I've bought equipment that I never thought I would need, and I need to learn how to use it properly.
Yeah.
All of this it's just endlessly fascinating being able to do all this myself. And I know you're living through that too. It's the current passion is the entrepreneurial founder lifestyle. It's brilliant.
Well, the game is lucky to have you, mate, with all your experience. And actually, it makes me almost a bit relieved to think that there's someone who's so capable with all your experience who's actually here to try and help the game out. And your head and your heart, most importantly, is in the right place with that, it feels like. It feels like you genuinely care about the game, which I think is almost obvious to say after the conversation we've had so far. But it's also inspirational for the fact that after having a career to such a high degree, you've gone, you know what? No, I want to learn new skills. You're here with all
100%.
your experience and still admitting openly, not even just to yourself, that I need to learn how to do this. I need to learn how to do that. And I think it should be inspirational to anyone listening to this at home right now, is that, especially in the world of social media and content creation, like it's not rocket science, but there is a lot to learn. And there's a lot of information out there to learn it. But all that matters is taking action, moving forwards, and actually, we were speaking before about this, about getting a light and understanding how to position and to the warmth of a light, all these sort of things where it's like, I'm just making videos at home, but these sort of things sort of add up and build a skill set. And I think that links nicely back around to what we're talking about, getting a job in these spaces, is that alongside getting my degree at university, I built a 100,000 follower business. You
Yeah.
know, like it's doing those additional things, and that's by no means a very humble brag. Like, I've worked hard. Like, I went to uni from 9 to 5, and then 5 to 9 I came and did this. But it's learning those skills to differentiate yourself. So when you get yourself into that meeting, like you've done in the past, and I've done myself, like you're in a position where you go, actually, yeah, I am a good person. I think that's what I'm trying to say. You seem like a
Yeah.
good bloke.
Well, is it interesting that the analogy works on field and off the field? Like the best players are the ones that are going doing that extra work. They're practicing their passing and their tackling for before the game. They're doing their warm ups. They're doing their recovery. Those things are known as being the difference makers, but it's the exact same in life. It's those difference makers are what going to make you stand out and help you succeed.
Indeed. And let's look into the future now. I've just mentioned that you're helping the game out with all your experience. We've brushed over some points around creating the community and things like that around rugby and all the off-field stuff. But if there was something that you think would help save rugby, to push it forward further into the 21st century, I know you've got your brand that you started as well. Talk me through what you think that is from your point of view.
Yeah, it's quite hard to find something that hasn't already been mentioned. I've been listening to your podcast and talking to what other people, so I'm going to focus mainly on the stuff that I deal with, and I think the off-field offering around what people wear for rugby is missing the mark. And I can prove that. When you go and watch games, I've mentioned this earlier, if you go and watch games and see what people are actually wearing, this is what a product manager or designer should be doing. Go and observe what your target audience is actually wearing and how they're behaving. And they're wearing, I'm going to say they're like maybe a puffer jacket to the game, or a quarter zip, and maybe a barber coat, and they're wearing vintage rugby jerseys. Or I see a lot of university students, because there are lots of universities around here in the Northeast, and they go and watch the Red Bulls on a Friday night, and they're wearing baggy, oversized joggers and big hoodies and lots of Carhartt and workwear. Yeah. And then I go and see what Nike, Adidas, Canterbury are serving as here's what you should buy from us. It's all replica. I mean, it's not all replica, but most of it is, here is a copy of what the players are wearing on field that's made out of polyester. It's a bright color. It's got sponsor logos all over it. And it's just not wearable. And it's not something people are proud to wear. I can make the case that this exact transition happened with golf over the last 10 to 15 years. I remember being sat in Nike World Headquarters, and there's a company called NPD, and they do market trends. And the guest speaker was talking about how golf was dead. People were not going to golf clubs. People weren't playing. It was seen as an old, rich, white guy sport. This is just 10, 15 years ago. And since then, it's effectively been, I don't know what the right word is, it's been gentrified over the last 10 years, where anybody can now play golf. Kids are getting into it. There's lots of creatives, there's rappers, there's movie stars, there's musicians playing golf because of everything that's built around it. It's seen as a lifestyle sport. And I'm certain that rugby could do that. And I have to mention also, cricket is crying out for it. I would love to take that on, but I'd never played the game and never watched it, so it's not for me. But it's going to happen, and I don't know who's going to do it, but hopefully I can be involved in it. But what happened to golf will happen to rugby as well. I said I didn't want to copy what other people said, but Jim Hamilton talks a lot about the access to what's happening in players' lives. I think that's like so off point as well. That's not really my world or expertise, but as an observer, I remember watching Living with the Lions 1997, probably on cassette, and maybe not even a DVD at that point. I can't remember. But it was the thing that it was a videotape. We put the videotape on the bus on the way to a game and watch Living with the Lions. And you've got your players that you look up to, frankly drunk, singing Wonderwall around the table after the game, and they're representing like everything that me as a, I don't know, 15, 16-year-old kid watching my heroes act and do what I was doing made me feel like that was an achievable goal. It made me feel like I could be a rugby player. And I can remember arms around each other and huddles and psyching each other up before games. I don't even know if that still really happens that way anymore. It's probably developed a little bit, but it was very like Lawrence Delalio and Neil Jenkins being sick in the back, and all those things. If you haven't seen Living with the Lions, go watch it, because it's so real, raw, and authentic, and the players recorded it themselves on video cameras. Just one of the best sports documentaries, period. And that is what should be happening with current rugby, but instead you get this polished veneer of, we're professionals and look at the stuff we do. And Jim Hamilton talks about how, you're interviewing somebody having a coffee, and it's like that's got nothing to do with the game. Like, what's the actual game really like? That has to happen. It won't be me doing it, but I think that will change for sure, and it'll get more people involved in the game.
It's fascinating. I have this constant conversation around what makes rugby, holds rugby back from being anything more. But I'm also realizing that it's rugby's savior as well. So in the prime example of this, there's no I in team is a classic rugby saying, not just rugby, but like generally speaking. And for any individual to be above the team is awful in rugby. Like, it's like, no, what are you on about? Like, compared to football again, where in football you have all these individual personalities, because in reality, Messi can run from his own goal to the other goal and kick a goal. Like, you can do that in football, whereas in rugby, it's very unlikely. And if you can do it, you'll do it for a couple of weeks, and then they'll figure something out and they won't be able to do it again. So the team is everything. So to suggest that a personality can be above that, look at the likes of Henry Pollock, for example, and the backlash he gets. It's like, it makes rugby horrible. Like, no, you don't want to do that. But in reality, it's what will grow the game. But also we don't want to lose it, because that no I in team mentality is what makes the game. So it's real difficult in that sense. But again, as I mentioned, like, not only does rugby hold itself back, but the answer to pushing itself forward could also lie in the past with all the vintage stuff you mentioned. You look at,
Yeah.
jumped out in my mind is thinking about how fashion crosses over with sport in many different ways, or sport leads into mainstream fashion. And I just jumped straight into my mind was like NASCAR driving. And you see they have sponsors all over their garments. Like they've
Yeah.
got those big leather jackets, but it's become synonymous with general fashion. Like you see some girls going on nights out wearing these big old
It's
bomber
true.
jackets. And you're like, okay, right. Maybe the answer lies in the problem. Maybe this old fashioned mentality is actually the answer. If you blend it with enough of the right modernization, where you can do these behind the scenes documentaries, but players aren't losing contracts because of it, because they're being too outlandish. Like, I've seen some like professional lads out on the piss a few times, just coincidentally in London or even in Melbourne, and you're like, bloody hell, lads. You are just a group of
Yeah. Yeah.
fellas, aren't you? Like, it's just the same as me and
Yeah.
my mates going on a night out. But it's that balance between the heritage and the history, which both holds back, but also could be the bow and arrow that propels you forwards at the same time.
It's really interesting that rugby could sort of like lean into the physical endeavor and the intensity and the ferociousness of being on field, and sort of like a bit like MMA does. It could sort of go into that world. And I've heard this discussed before, and still become a spectacle as a sport, but maybe puts off a lot of people from playing. And then you see the TikTok video that happened a couple of weeks ago where you've got world class players like just having a laugh in their room. And
Yeah.
again, I would say as an exercise of which is the right version. Maybe you don't need to make a choice. Maybe you appeal to different people in different ways, but one certainly cut through and the other one isn't at the moment. And I think seeing access to players just have a laugh and be themselves is working today. And that's what women's rugby's been doing so well. Like that video is just a case of what, like, you've got so many videos. You go back through and look at Tommy Freeman's previous videos. There's one in particular where it's him doing a voiceover and walking and getting into a hot tub or doing an ice bath. And he's like, that's the professional environment. He's like, I'm going and doing this. No one's interested. But him doing a dance in his bedroom gets millions of views.
Especially amongst the demographic that really matters at this stage. It's
Yeah.
those young
Yeah.
lads. The young lads, they love it. It's hilarious. It's the same with the Leicester Tigers lads who do I don't know if you've seen like the Premier League forfeit challenge stuff.
Right. I haven't
Go
seen it.
on TikTok and have a look at this
Yeah.
afterwards, because it's hilarious. Because you just see like Freddie Stewart doing some awful TikTok dance because he's lost the Premier League, like Fantasy League that week.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
those younger people who are the target demographic, in my opinion, that are going to help save and grow the game and move it forward. And I think it's a naturally evolving process. But the big caveat to all of that is involvement in the game from a young age, because when you dial in on the big hits, like I get told about it in commentary when I'm commentating on school games, to not overemphasize the significance of a massive tackle,
Oh,
because
wow.
it makes some parents reluctant to put their young people playing rugby, because it's like, okay, what about CTE? What about concussion injuries and all those sorts of things? And it's like, okay, you want to die. Like, you don't see people like they say, like, you don't play boxing, you don't play
No.
MMA, you fight, and it's what it's known for, and you have to do it very seriously. Whereas a lot of people just play rugby for fun, especially at a young age. So that's where, again, the answer lies in the same place the problem is, because like the younger demographics are key, but the
Yeah.
parents are the ones who are holding the lock, really.
Yeah. You just reminded me of when you say play. There was obviously rugby's not played all year round either. It's something that's another issue with loads of sports. Like, it's seasonal. You asked me right at the start about my fondest memories in rugby, and it just reminded me of something. There was in the summer when we were off school, my brother and my friends, my teammates that were at school used to go and play with what were pro rugby players, and we would play. And there's a big open field, free to play, right? It's like literally jumpers for goalposts. We play on a rugby pitch, but we played across the way and just play touch, not formal organized flag touch, but we play touch for hours. And those are some of the fondest memories, because I was like, I'm hanging out and playing with pros that I look up to, but you have that way to do the same as them and have access without having, you can physically compete because it's a game of touch rugby instead of like sevens was seen as the savior for a while, right? It was seen as like, this is a more, but you still, in fact, it's probably harder to play. It's
Yeah.
It's just as physical. It's incredibly tiring. And like if 7 minutes of sevens is like hell sometimes. But touch rugby is just a pure joy to play. And you look at what happens in the Pacific nations and the culture around just being able to just throw a ball around for the fun of it. I would love to see more of that too in the outside. Like without it being an organized game, like it's sort of frustrating that you have to touch rugby's happening. Like I used to live in Southwest London, and you could see touch rugby playing, but it was you have to pay a fee to join in, and you wear a flag, and you have to get your team together, and it's at a certain time. But we used to just organize games and hang out and play like you would do if you play five-a-side football with your friends.
And that links nicely back to what we were speaking about earlier about like these club settings. Because in
Yeah,
reality, I'm thinking, all right, okay, what's the commercial opportunity of this? What's the commercial way of monetizing people watching these games? Because I don't think people really will care about watching touch rugby on the beach, but that's not the point. It's the
no.
same with the Diamond League athletics. Like no one really, well, no offense to athletics people, I'm sure there's lots of people who do love it, but no one really cares. People care about going for a run and being part of a rugby. They enjoy doing the sport. So that's the same with rugby in the sense it doesn't have to be some commercial viewing sponsorship. It could just be playing the game.
there's it's difficult to put your finger on the commercial opportunity behind your local run club that's linked to a coffee shop, that's some independent coffee shop in wherever you live. It's small, but it's growing the sport or the activity of running as a whole, and that can be leveraged. So yeah, I think honestly that the people that play rugby themselves, the people that have played, the community needs to be the ones that drag it into the future and make it something better.
Good answer. Good answer. He ticks off a few points there, Matt. And honestly, this conversation has been fascinating, insightful for me, if not for you guys listening at home. If you have listened this far into the episode, Matt, how can they help you out? How can these rugby nauses who've made it all the way to the end of this episode of Talking Ruggers help you and your business?
But first of all, wear your stash, wear your kit. I want people to start wearing the uniforms that they used to play in. I think retros and wearing the uniform of the sport, which is the jersey. If you've got an old one or you want to buy an old one from a vintage reseller, I think that is, for one, it's on trend, it's cool, it's fashionable. Go do it and support resellers. I think that's really cool. But if you want to know what I'm doing, it's oldnovo.com and old.novo on Instagram. I'm posting as much as daily at the moment, talking about how I'm trying to build the brand. I tend to talk about a couple of things, either me building the brand and the product I'm creating, or the sport of rugby as a whole, and some of the history and some of the lesser known points that people might have forgotten about.
Hell yeah. Well, go check him out because the content you put out there is fascinating. You're telling some interesting stories that, like, as a rugby nose, I'm embarrassed that I didn't know myself. Honestly, it's interesting to see what you're doing, especially from the point of view of growing a brand in the game that is really doing everyone a favor. Honestly, I'm loving the garments that are coming out, and I know you've got a lot in the works. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled, guys. I appreciate you all for listening this far into the episode. If you have enjoyed it, go down there, drop a like, rate it 5 stars, whatever you have to do on whatever podcast platform. Let me know in the comment section who you might want to have next. But otherwise, I hope you enjoy your week of trading and go well on the weekend, and I'll catch you in the next one.